day at itnetwork.tv.
Good morning, good morning, good morning, and thank you for joining us on another episode of the Roundtable Talk Show. It feels amazing to be back, just like a family reunion. I get to meet some new friends, some old friends, some people who have been on the show a million times, and people who have been on the show for their first time. But guess what? We're going to learn about business. That's my passion, business and entrepreneurship. I'm going to go ahead and introduce my very first guest, Dr. Shadi. He is the CEO and founder and chief medical officer of Vet Triage. Good morning, Dr. Shadi. How are you?
Good morning. I am well. Good to see you back.
It is great to be here. I know you were on the show at least 3 or 4 times before. Every time you're on the show, we learn something amazing. Now, tell the people who you are, what you do, and what you're passionate about.
I'm a board certified veterinary surgeon. I've been a veterinarian for just over 15 years. I've gone through many different roles in the veterinary field, general practice, emergency, specialty, rescue, and own my own hospitals, managed plenty of departments. And so my most recent frontier is veterinary telemedicine. It's something that's been utilized since probably 1980 in the field, but underutilized since, and the pandemic kind of opened that up. I actually had this idea prior and actually launched before the pandemic. So it was just a fortuitous timing, I suppose. But Vet Triage is a 24/7 veterinary telehealth service where folks who own pets can go on and speak to a veterinarian live on video. We do any species. We're global. And so that's what I've been up to over the past 2.5 years, and started working that project about probably 4 or 5 years ago, creating our own software platform and figuring out the legalities behind it. And basically now Vet Triage has become at the forefront of the telemedicine movement in the field. And so we are not just progressive in terms of medicine, but also the legal aspect, trying to shape the laws that are antiquated. So it's a lot involved with a 24/7 company, and I'm enjoying every minute of it.
Wow, incredible. We want to go a little bit deeper, but I want to go ahead and introduce our next guest, Mr. Emanuel Hines. He is the former finance minister for the country of El Salvador and division chief for the World Bank. He's going to talk to us about his new book, In Defense of Liberal Democracy. Good morning, Emanuel. How are you?
Hello, how are you, Sharifa? It's a real pleasure being with you, and with you also, Shadi.
Likewise, sir.
It's so interesting what you do. It's very much into what I am very interested, which is this development of new technologies, of new things, new ways of looking at things, and so on. So it's a great pleasure to meet you too. Yes. So would you like me to say something about myself?
Absolutely. Tell us who you are, what you do, and what you're passionate about.
Okay. Well, as you said, I in my past I worked at the World Bank for many years. I worked with 35 different countries. Lending money, analyzing their economies, and so on, including, very interestingly, the Soviet Union and then Russia. I was there when there was the change, the collapse of communism. Then I have worked also with the Middle East. I was also with the Council on Foreign Relations in New York. And I just finished writing my fourth book, which is the one you mentioned, In Defense of Liberal Democracy, which has to do precisely with the impact on society of the new technologies and the new ways of doing things, and which is more or less, you have these young people, now working in things that didn't exist 20 years ago or 10 years ago, and how this is changing society, and then how we have to prepare in terms of our political system, so to absorb all these changes.
Wow, that's interesting. I'm sitting on the edge of my seat because that's one of the conversations that a lot of people are having right now. Some people basically say there's this great crash coming. People are saying that the world has changed. It'll never go back to the way it was. What do you see coming up for the world right now?
Well, this is not the first time that something like this happened. This happened 100 years ago with the Industrial Revolution. When people, within one generation in the United States, from agrarian, they became urban, from agricultural, they became industrial, and this changed completely the way society related to each other, people related to each other. And some countries, like Germany, for example, or Russia, or Italy, when they confronted this challenge, they broke and they became tyrannies, because they couldn't manage this amount of change. And then, the society fragmented, people became, opposite to each other. Something that we are seeing today, which is really worrisome, and then they couldn't manage this within a democratic system. In the United States, in England, in France, they manage it, but not in these other countries. And when this happens, people are afraid of chaos. And to avoid that, they go for a tyrant, a dictator, or something like that. And then my book, is defending, because many people say, we have to go into a dictator now. We have to give the power to one person so that this person will manage everything and, will control all the adjustments. And that's very bad, That is what happened in Russia. This is what happened in Germany. And what I'm saying is, if you are going through changes, you need a very flexible system. And the most flexible system is democracy. And the most rigid one is a tyranny, when only one person decides everything, and then it becomes extremely rigid.
Interesting. I know, Dr. Shadi, this has expanded your business, let's say, because all of a sudden more people were used to watching things through Zoom, having conversations through Zoom, talking to people through the internet because they couldn't go out. So it forced them to have to interconnect and connect through the internet. Would you say?
Absolutely. I mean, the reasons for using, let's say, a service like mine, it goes beyond just you just can't go anywhere because of a pandemic. The need has always been there. What's changed, one thing that has changed since the pandemic is the comfort with the type of technology. It's normal now. Prior to that, we knew a few people who would use Skype, used it once in a while, and nobody heard of Zoom. And now we're all familiar with the technology. But the need for a service like Vet Triage was present since people started owning animals. Everything from geographic challenges, financial challenges. Your dog's aggressive, your cat is feral, you have a pet that's prone to stress, and so a car ride to a vet is a problem. A variety, folks who can't drive, who don't have a car, who are elderly, etc. So there's many reasons for the use of it. It's just what ended up happening since the pandemic is now words like Zoom and video chat and all this stuff, video conferencing, have become household names, and also telemedicine as well, right? Folks now know what telemedicine is. That's even though it's been around in the human side for decades prior to veterinary medicine and grabbing onto it. These are now household words. Everybody knows these terms now. So it certainly helped familiarize folks with the type of technology that we're utilizing.
Yes. Now, give us an example of some of the animals or some of the just animals you're able to treat through telehealth.
We're up to now, I think, 26, 27 different animal types that we've helped. And this type of service, obviously, there's no hands-on. So you're trying to do the best you can to figure out, do you actually have an emergency with your pet, a critical, life-threatening, time-sensitive emergency? Or this could be something that we can band-aid in the meantime? The most interesting stories that we have are folks who live in remote areas. So, for example, we had a dog that has a really bad skin infection, let's say. They live in Bethel, Alaska. And then the only available 24/7 hospital is going to be either a ferry ride or a plane ride away. You have to either go to Homer, Alaska or Juneau, Alaska to get veterinary care. The veterinarian in their location flies in 1 week a month. So if you're sick the other 3 weeks, you're out of luck unless you can set up a plane ride or a boat ride. And what's worse is if you've set up that kind of transit, you can't go with your pet. The vehicle is so small. It's the pilot and then the pet. So that's a very common scenario that we really give people relief on. Our most interesting, I would say, animal interaction was probably a pleco, which is a fish. It's one of those algae suckers that you see in fish tanks. They stick to the glass and they eat the algae. And so a woman was on a video conference call, and the husband had found the pleco, jumped out of the tank, and was on the floor in the living room and thought it was dead. And so he didn't want to upset her. She's in a meeting, so he put the pleco in the garbage. And 5-6 hours later, she comes out of the office, and he said, sorry, the pleco died. And next thing you know, the garbage bag in the trash is moving. And she goes in there, and the thing is still alive. And she puts it right in the fish tank and then calls my company. And I get on the video with her, and she wanted to find out, what can we do for this now, the aftermath of a pet who's presumably died. And it's a fish, and not just any fish, the pleco. There's no pleco vets, that's not a thing. And so it just the breadth of what we can deal with this type of technology is absolutely amazing.
I want to know the end of that story. What did you do with the pleco?
So I looked at it on video, and to me, having had that as a pet when I was a child, I was somewhat familiar with what they should look like. And this one had kind of cloudy eyes. And so I figured, well, that's probably a stress-induced response to almost dying or suffocating or whatever it was going through. I don't understand how it survived out of the water for 5+ hours. And so I had to go to my literature, the veterinary literature, and figure out what do cloudy eyes mean in a pleco. And I ended up sending her some literature on that. But basically my advice was monitor and see what happens. It appears to be functional right now. It's already eating in the fish tank. So just monitor, and we'll look for signs of illness. That's the extent of it.
Wow. I would just think that it's difficult to see through a screen certain illnesses or certain ailments. You mentioned the skin. I mean, you can't really see that through the screen. How do you make an adequate diagnosis?
You get creative with it. First, I'll say that if you talk to any medical board, they'll say that you cannot make a diagnosis with telemedicine, which I will wholeheartedly disagree. There are plenty of cases where you can be fairly certain of a diagnosis. Maybe you can't confirm it because you can't take samples and what have you, but there's almost nothing else this disease could be based on that scenario. So regardless of that whole debate, you get really creative with camera angles, with lighting, have the folks zoom in, zoom out, touch your pet here, palpate this, move this. And so you get fairly creative with it. If I need really high resolution images, and I'll have them text or email me close-ups of the area. And that'll help as well. So we use a combination of tools to try and get as close to an answer as we can.
Wow, that's impressive. Man, you have any pets?
I do. It's a dog, a little dog, but now it is with one of my daughters, but I really love the pets, and I think that what Shadi is doing is a very good example of how a technology can really help in an area, that was completely virgin. And because as you said, before these technologies, you really had to take a plane or something like that to help your pet and so on. So I think that this is a win-win situation, in any way. Now, the problem is when the same technology can create problems, for other people, like, for example, what we are doing now, people who work from home, which is the same principle, the same technologies and so on. And now, because of COVID, people learn how to work from afar, using new technologies. And this is wonderful. This is very good. This is going to be very, very, you can do surgery, through the internet now and these kind of things. But there are people who lived from the transportation of these people to the work and so on. This is exactly the same that happened 100 years ago when you needed 100 people to take care of a certain amount of land, and because of tractors and so on, you only needed 12, let's say. What do you do with the rest? So, many people say that this is bad, and it is not bad, really. The productivity is increasing for the country, for everybody. What we have to do is to prepare the other people to do other things, and you have to be creative in how to deal with this problem, because it will create more opportunities.
It seems you're reminding me same discussions that folks have around artificial intelligence, where there was this fear of it replacing folks' livelihood, and the response probably is, well, don't fight it. It's going to happen, let's say, regardless. You figure out a way to adapt to it. There's now going to be new opportunities that arise from this. And so what you're speaking of kind of reminds me of that argument. Manuel, do you think that like the Industrial Revolution, do you think then the most recent boom, let's say, that hit us on a national or on a global stage is probably the internet? You think that would be the modern day equivalent of the Industrial Revolution?
I think so. I think so. Definitely. If you can look at it in this way, the Industrial Revolution multiplied the power of the muscle. It was horsepower, machines and so on. And this revolution is multiplying the power of the mind. It's it's snowing, it's impossible to move. There is an animal that is, sick. And then you from 1,000 miles, you can help these people so that, this is a complete, tremendous revolution. It has changed even the image of what is who are the creators of wealth. Before, 20 years ago, if you wanted to say, well, this is a very powerful company, you would take a picture of General Motors, which has a lot of, you could see a lot of activity there and noise and so on. And now you take a picture of Apple. It's a campus. It's not a factory. It's just the mind, that is producing there. So we are coming into an economy of knowledge, and this is, I think, a tremendous revolution. And it has at the other side, on the other side, it has this other kind of feature, which is it is available to everybody. Anybody can get into the internet, and then, we are becoming closer to each other, which is at the same, it's really a great benefit, but it's also a great challenge, because we have to learn to be close to each other in an intimate way that we were not before. We have to learn to live with each other. And I think that people have not, understood what are all these implications. We really have to pay attention to this, because if we don't do it, this could become a very bad thing. But actually, it could be a wonderful thing as well, because we can know each other, see that, we are all the same, and have a bigger and greater society than we have now.
No, I definitely agree. I've seen more people sit down for family dinners, Sunday dinners, have more calls, more conversations. Because we're not having that long periods of time at work, that 2-hour commute back and forth, getting home exhausted. So we have more time to focus on our family, but we also have more time to focus on our own ideas, our own vision, our own corporations, our own, entrepreneurship goals that we want for ourselves, and not just using our time and energy and manpower, as you said, Manuel, on other businesses or other companies.
Yeah, exactly.
And if I could expand also on that sort of bringing together, we have another reason why that Triage exists, because the culture is broken in the veterinary field. And it's been breaking down for some time. It just took the pandemic to kind of escalate it. And so what has occurred is, because of all the adoptions during the pandemic, the number of patients that need veterinary care greatly outweighs the number of veterinarians that are available. By a margin that has resulted in veterinary hospitals having to close down their hours or completely, and staffing is a huge problem. And we can't find veterinarians, we can't find veterinary technicians to fill in the gaps. They're not out there, despite us pumping out the highest number of veterinarians in our history. There's the largest number of veterinary schools ever. We're pumping out more veterinarians than ever, and yet we can't seem to find them to hire for work. And so there's a cultural issue that we're trying to fix as well. And one of the statistics that are quoted is the suicide rate in the veterinary field. It's insane. It's insane. And so what social media has done to some degree, the internet has done, is made problems like this come to light, and groups now are surrounding this to try and help support veterinarians emotionally, psychologically, mentally, whatever you want to call it, to try and get through this. It's a trying time. And so whereas a brick and mortar facility is struggling to find a veterinarian to work in their hospital, I'm sitting on over 100 resumes waiting to work for the company. I have way more veterinarians that want to do this work than I have sick animals. Obviously, that's part of what we're trying to do, is spread the word on vet triage so I can hire more vets to make them busy. But it's great for me, but sad to see, because the veterinarians really should not want to work for my company. They should want to be at a facility, hands-on, right in there, fixing animals. They don't want to be there anymore. Part of it is generational too. They've got a different mindset and sort of different life goals, I would say, different desire of work-life balance. But the other is that we've ruined a profession slowly over decades. We've ruined it, and so we're seeing that challenge as well. And I think that speaks to some of what Emanuel is speaking to.
Well, I think that you are putting the finger right there. Actually, when I start my book with a quotation from Tom Paine, which is exactly something that you just said. You said these are trying times, and Tom Paine, during the time of the independence, he said these are times that try the souls of men, because of this, because you are getting into all these changes. And sometimes you have to focus not on the change, it's on the change. You are changing from this to that. You have to focus on the process of change. You are maybe moving into something that is better, okay? But culturally, it may be very difficult to move from one to the other. If, for example, you are a professional and your profession disappears because of the new technology. That's a very difficult time, and you have children and your wife and so on. And then how do you manage this? How do you manage personally, but also how can the government and society manage this? I think this is a process in which both government and people have to cooperate. It's really a challenge to society, because it's very easy, when something like this is happening, it's very easy that people who are left behind, they start to think that this is unfair, and that really there is something who is conspiring against them, that everything is, and then you have to really, this is nothing that you can just manage massively. You have to do personal work, I think that, what you do, Sharifa, is very good. This kind of thing, when you get in touch with the people, you discuss with them things that are important for them. This kind of activity, getting in touch with the people, will be crucial, I think, to solve the problems of the adaptation.
Well, thank you. I want to go back to Dr. Shadi. And I don't know what's hearing that.
Echoing.
Yes, for some reason now it's echoing. But I want to go back to something you said earlier, Dr. Shadi, when you said that there was a very high suicide rate within the veterinarian industry. And that was surprising to me. I know that suicides have increased during the pandemic, but specifically, do you see a reason, or do you, I mean, is it they're unable to find jobs, or they come out of school and there's nowhere for them to go? What do you see as the high suicide rate in veterinarians?
No, they have plenty of opportunity to work. I mean, if you open up a veterinary hospital right now, you'll become flooded with new clients. You'll need veterinarians immediately. That's not the problem. The problem is there's a toxicity. There's a toxicity in the workplace, and there's a toxicity that's between the client, the pet owner, and the veterinarian. So, for example, on the front of the client, pet owner, and the veterinarian, something like, for example, a very common example is social media. So if you go to a veterinary clinic, and if you don't agree with either the prices or the way that they operate, or there's a poor outcome with your pet, then you can immediately go on social media and just rain terror on that veterinarian and the veterinary hospital.
Oh,
and
wow.
That wreaks emotional havoc on the veterinarian and the veterinary staff, because you have a person here. Veterinarians inherently are for the animals, not much for people, but they really love the animals. They're mostly introverted folks. They're not really the most outgoing people. They run on passion. They're not in this to try and make money. They're in this because they want to take care of animals. And yet here they are getting blasted on social media for doing the best job they could, and an outcome that occurred despite their best efforts, because you're not fixing a car, you're fixing a biological creature. So they get blasted on social media. That destroys your morale. It happens once a veterinarian is leveled. But we all know it doesn't just happen once, right? If you've been doing this for years or decades, it's going to happen repeatedly. That wears you down. And so that's on the client front, one example of why a veterinarian starts to undergo the mental changes that becomes a negative. On the toxicity front, we have veterinarians, and Emanuel, this speaks somewhat to your point, who are fairly old school. They're used to working 80 hours a week. That's a normal veterinary position for them. They also don't want to spend time mentoring the new graduates. And the new graduates want to have a quality of life. They want a work-life balance. For them, full-time is 30, 35 hours a week. They're not even thinking 40 hours a week, let alone 80 hours a week. So we have this clash of generations where the veterinarian who owns a practice has one foot out the door, hires a new graduate. The new graduate has a very different mentality from the old school guy, let's say, stereotypically speaking, and you have this clash, and the veterinary owner does not know how to manage a veterinarian like this, who needs a little more mentoring, who needs a work-life balance. They don't know how to manage that. And so you end up with somewhat of a tyrannical type of environment where there's a toxicity there. There's no support. There's negativity. There's a lot of internal bashing. And then that, of course, spreads to your staff. Your veterinary technicians, veterinary assistants, receptionists all feel that negativity. So you're killing it from the inside. That doesn't just happen at one practice. That happens over hundreds or thousands across the US. Oh, wow. And so we end up with this, where you have veterinarians, new graduates who get out of the profession, get to their first job, they get blasted on social media, their boss is a tyrant, their staff is miserable because of years of this. They leave the profession. That doesn't just happen once, it's happened multiple times. And so my theory as to where veterinarians are going is they're not being vets after the first year or two out of school. They're done. This generation does not, they don't have to worry about their debt, because their life goals, their passion runs them, fuels them. They'll deal with the debt another way. They'll make their money some other way, but they're not going to be veterinarians because we're killing them. So the suicide rates are a combination of many, many complex factors. Two major ones are the ones I just mentioned. And Manuel, to your point, I was wondering, the same way we have antiquated people running the show here, we have old school vets who run practices, who don't understand newer generations. We have old school vets who are in veterinary medical boards who don't really understand or see the value or are afraid of changing to a telemedicine platform. Do you think that folks in government setting who should be working with the people, you think that part of the clash there, they don't understand new technologies and they don't understand the new generations, and perhaps there is some level of antiquatedness, if that's a word, that is creating turmoil and mistrust between government and the society?
Absolutely. You know, I didn't mention this, but you are mentioning this now, coming from reality. It's there is a resistance to change, which is one of the most dangerous things that could happen in these times. Which is when you see that things are changing, there are many people who see things changing and they say, well, I'm going to try to adjust to this. I'm going to learn. I'm going to try to find. I'm going to join into this movement. But there are other people who say we have to stop them, and that it could become very, very dangerous. It is like when you have a river coming down, with a lot of water, and then you have to stop it, and then it's the water will overflow completely whatever you put there, because these things are tremendously powerful. It's you cannot change them, because what happens is that they are feeling some real needs in people. So the new technologies will go on and on, but then people start using the government or regulatory powers in order to stop it, and then you really create the environment for chaos, and really you create conflict, where in some situations that could be solved very peacefully, but then they create these conflicts. I absolutely agree. They start establishing kind of regulations that will preempt the young people to grow, for example. And so it's very shocking, listening to this thing about the suicide rate, but I'm not surprised, because there are many people who are trying to stop the young ones, and as you say, is if somebody is is 2 years from school and they still don't have anything, they are done with, and so it's a very difficult situation. I think it's good to explain things, reduce the fear of the old school. You have to reduce the fear of the old school. It's there is a lot of communication, but also there must be some transfer of power to the young people, so that you start adjusting altogether to these things.
Do you feel that there's a fear of the new school as well, of new technology coming in and making jobs obsolete?
Oh, there are many people who are very afraid of this. People who read one of these articles you can see in magazines or in the newspapers, saying this and this and these professions are gone,
Right.
because the new technologies will replace them and so on. So many of these people, these people could adjust, or they could just try to oppose it, and then if you open the possibility for politicians to say no, the things that are happening are not fair, and we are going to legislate everything so that you won't be, for example, what is happening with coal, okay?
Yes.
Coal is being replaced for many good economic reasons, besides the problem of pollution and so on. But there are many people who are being left without a job there.
Right.
So the situation is not to say we are going to keep producing coal so that these people can work here. We should look for new opportunities for these people. We should look for giving more education or different education for these people to really adjust. But I agree absolutely with you.
Dr. Shadi?
Yeah, should there be some call though to personal responsibility when it comes to folks whose career is becoming antiquated and no longer viable? It's one thing of course, we need the help of a higher power, let's say like a government for sure, to help with this transition. that never moves fast enough,
Yeah.
So if they're out of touch and it takes forever for them to make changes, but the person whose job is now extinct needs something right now to support
Exactly.
themselves and their family. So to some degree, shouldn't there be at least some call of personal responsibility for those individuals to say, okay, I'm in a bad position right now. I need a job like tomorrow, and I don't have skills for these jobs. What can I do to remedy this as quickly as possible while the government or whatever power figures things out?
Yeah, well, I think that the private sector should help in this as well. It's there are situations in which the jobs just disappear, from one day to the other, to the next. But in many of these cases, that this is going to happen. Like, for example, I'm saying the case of coal. You know that coal will go away. You know that, for example, oil. People who work with oil, not now, but eventually, demand for them will decline as well. And you can start working with the schools and with companies so that they can help people to shift from one kind of production to another kind. I think that in some cases in energy, I think that they are doing pretty well. The case that you are presenting is, for example, the people who was left without a job because of COVID. Okay,
Yes.
but these people, they couldn't see it coming, and then
Right.
suddenly it disappeared. And well, many people thought when this thing is reduced, COVID, becomes less and less dangerous, people will come back to work, and they are not coming back to work.
Right.
It's and you have that the things that you cannot foresee, like for example, what is happening now, the supply chain problems. It's
Right.
you cannot get the raw materials coming from China or whatever, and then you cannot produce and so on. These are the most difficult cases. I think that helping these people directly with cash is a good solution. It's the required solution. Of course, the problem is that in the long run, maybe it is not sustainable, but actually the fire is now, okay? And then you will have to provide. So I think that the things that the government in the United States did were good. These injections of cash to the people. But now, I also think that providing some programs to provide jobs is also a good idea. Many people will be lifted by this program. Maybe I am a little afraid that it's too big. This new program of investment. It could be too big and it could lead to inflation. But the idea, I think it's a very good idea. Still, there will be many people who will, fall between the cracks.
Yes.
I think that this kind of people you cannot help with the government. It has to be, the civil society. It should be people, organizations. There must be a social interest in the communities to work with these people. Even if you are an egoistical person, if you see that in your community there are too many of these people, then it is in your own interest to go and help them. Because you don't want to live in a society where you see this separation. This separation is always very bad. It's always very bad.
But I think we're seeing that across the board. And so many people, even though the jobs are opening and they're returning, that's one of the biggest problems that corporations and companies have right now, is they're saying that no one wants to work. But as a society, there's still a fear of dying and death and COVID and going out of the home and leaving the
Yes,
home.
yes, yes, yes. You are between a rock and a hard place, you
Right.
know. And you have to understand that from the point of view of the government and from the point of view of the civil society, and try to help into this, in this. You know, it's in the old times, in the let's say in the Middle Ages, you had this. It was a, priests and religious people who manage this kind of charity, let's say. You know, there was a home where you could go if you didn't have anything to eat, and so on. And this happened also during the Great Depression. You know,
Right.
they had this, some people who provided soup and so on. I think that the situation now is not as much as giving soup, but there are many services that these people are needing. You know, it's including the education of the children, and healthcare and so on. So I think that for this you will need a lot of private sector foundations, you know, going into this. I'm sure that this can be done in the United States. But first, you have to pay attention to the problems. You know, it is like the one you were mentioning. Okay, I didn't know about the veterinarians with this particular problem. You know, but if people know about that, then mobilize not just the government but also the civil society to help into this, because it has to be very case by case when we are talking about the people falling into the cracks.
Right.
You,
Right.
you almost you need leaders in the field who know a field very, very well, to have a vision, to be able to see what's coming and how to help people in that field be able to evolve. So this reminds me of a story. Simon Sinek, is a speaker on YouTube. He's fairly popular, and he'll speak about the workplace, and he's very, very smart, very intelligent man. And he said a story early on in the pandemic. There was a pizzeria, and of course the pandemic shut down restaurants. You know,
Right.
and so that the owner of that pizzeria thought, well, I have all these employees and I have this oven. What can we do? We need to stay alive. And so they decided to use that oven to make masks for the pizza. They started making masks. And now what happens? That owner has now two businesses, right? Eventually, pandemic is going to be over. They're going to have a pizzeria, and now they know how to make masks too. And so that kind of innovation, that sort of vision, is a requirement. So I know my profession very well. I know the veterinary field. I know where we're going to be 10 years from now. I already know. If things play out the way they should play out, I know what the future veterinary clinic is going to look like, and where telemedicine is going to play a role, and how the emergency hospital and the rescue organizations and the general practitioners are all going to relate to each other. I can see what's going to happen. And so pending any catastrophes, I know where this is going to go. If you have somebody who's an expert in the coal field or other fields that are in danger, where are those leaders?
Yeah.
They should be creating a vision to move things forward. If you lift up the community, if you lift everybody up, everybody wins.
Exactly. Exactly. That's absolutely the case. But you need two things. One is the attitude, you know, because for many years, you know, things were going fine. Okay, no, there were no, these innovations were always good in the sense that they were, you know, extending the power of the Moscow. You know, they were more or less the same thing every day. But then, you know, then people forgot the value of the community. That's what I think.
I agree. Oh, yes.
So, people forgot that, you know. And then now people are trying to figure out what is the American dream.
Right.
And many people think that the American dream is a lot of money, you know, that you are going to make a lot of money. But that's not the American dream. The American dream was the community. You
Right.
know, the American dream was the fact that you could live in a community, and in that community you could, relate to anybody else, and you could go to there were parties, there were, somebody who was marrying, everybody knew this person, they would go there, and I had experiences. I lived in the United States for a long time of somebody dying, in the same block, and then everybody helping, immediately, and how are you going to educate the children? And we are going to put some money so that the children could keep on going. This kind of communal security and care, this has to be rediscovered, because actually this is the only source of happiness. It's
Yes.
this is, it is not that money was the end. The end was this. Money was a means to this.
Right. But you mentioned the community manual, but
Yes.
wasn't part of the American dream just simply the home ownership of having the security of knowing that you would be a homeowner and you would be able to provide for your family? I think
Yes.
that's a lot of the fear that's happening right now is
Yes.
people
Exactly.
can't afford the home to be homeowners, or they can't afford, they're wondering where they're going to get their next meal from. This pandemic has affected a lot of people straight to the core. So it's the community, but it's individual people that make up that community.
But the thing is, you have to change, the mentality of all the others.
Mhm.
So that you have to care for these people, these other people.
Mm.
Today is for you, tomorrow will be for me. That's
Right.
the kind of a mentality that you have in a good community.
Mhm.
Okay, and then people forgot about the community, and there is this idea that if you are in business, you only have to care about the business, and you have to maximize your profits, and that's it. You don't care about the rest of the people. If that kind of mentality will destroy any country. you
But
know
don't you think that the community aspect of things moved from the street to online? Because you now have communities, they're online and they're massive and they can reach more people across the
exactly.
world than what you can reach on a street block, right? And so maybe we have had for since the 1990s a huge community, but
Yes.
perhaps what gets the most attention are those that spark the most flames and are most toxic, and they get all the attention, all the
Yeah.
media coverage, where communities like, for example, the Veterinary Suicide Committee, they are helping, they're doing their thing, but they don't get the eyeballs that some sort of flagrant, toxic, fiery community gets online. And so perhaps we do have the communities that you're seeking, that you think we need, which I agree with, but it's moved to online. And then what gets the most traction are the ones that maybe are creating more of a divide than bringing people together and lifting people.
Yeah. Well, I think that it is initially it is more difficult to create a bonding if you are just electronically together. You know, but that's only initially. That's my experience. After a while, when you are seeing the other person, you start. There is something in your mind that connects with these people. The other people, and then you start having empathy.
Mm.
For
Yes.
for the problems and so on. And now, if you look at this, if you change this attitude, this attitude that I will only work for myself, I don't care what the others do. If they have problems, it's their problems, and then you realize that their problem is also your problem. It's and you internalize it because it is not true that people don't care about the other people. you
Mm.
know it's there is a natural instinct to care about the other people. It's
Right.
in economics there are many people who say no, 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 everybody is just self-interest. It is not true. when you start feeling this empathy, we have to learn how to connect this with, internet and the social media. And we have to rescue the social media from what it is today. Today it has become a means to create conflict, to put one people against the other and so on, when it could be fantastic if you could really do what it can do, which is what it can, which is put people together and extend the community, as you said. It's rather than talking about, what all these kind of terrible things that they put the children, girls, who have problems of feeding problems and so on, and you move this into helping people who are having problems like the suicide in this. This is a community, and now we are talking about your community, but actually it's our community also, because the veterinarians, I could be living, next door to a veterinarian, is part of my community as well. So I think that the emphasis, we have to make a lot of emphasis of this need to bonding with people, not just because you are happier when you bond with other people, but because of your own interest. You want your children and grandchildren, to live in a society where people care for each other. It's you really want that. It's and if you look at it from the point of view of economically, you want the country to progress, you want the country to grow, and the more educated and healthier are the people, the more you are going to grow. Before, people said, first we are going to grow, and then we are going to distribute. Then we are going to care for education and so on. Now, since we are living in a knowledge society, since we are living in the age of Apple, in which works with thoughts, in that world, if you don't give education and healthcare to the people, you are not going to produce, period. So,
Wow.
you have to do it first to produce.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
You have to care for the people. I think that's the main message that we took away from today's show. Now we are coming down to the last few minutes of the show. And what I love to do at the end of every show is just simply allow my guests the opportunity to speak directly to the audience, to everyone who is watching the show live, as well as everyone who is watching in the archives, and let them know what you want them to take away from your appearance here today. And we're going to start with you, Dr. Shadi.
Thank you so much. It really is great being back. Emanuel, it's a pleasure meeting you, sir. If you are a practice owner, if you own a veterinary hospital, you manage a facility, whether it's a small GP or a large 24/7 veterinary hospital, contact me. We provide partnerships to help with teletriage for your facility, to help take off the burden from your staff. And what we've seen over our numerous partners now in North America is not only do they have a higher retainment of their current staff, it's easier to hire new graduates, both veterinarians and veterinary technicians. Revenues go up, negative social media posts go down. We see a huge positive influx to your facility by partnering with Vet Triage to help with your triage. And that's a 24/7 operation at no cost to the facility. The pet parent pays Vet Triage. Doesn't cost you anything. We'll set up your landing page, flyers. My point is that those who are leaders in the field, who want to see the field improve, not just locally, not just in your facility, but for many, many years to come, for the profession as a whole, contact Vet Triage. We'll set up partnership with you, and it'll help everybody out who's involved to help improve your practice, not just from a business sense, but perhaps more importantly, culturally.
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Shadi. Emanuel, what would you like to leave the people with today?
Well, what I would like to is, I really believe in this. I really believe that we have to, as you said, we have to care for people for all reasons, even for egotistical reasons. We have to care for people. We are people, and we are not going to be happy if we don't do it. So it's my means of reaching people is through my book, my recent book in defense of liberal democracy. I would love if you read it, and that if you really want to go deeper into this message, which is the basic message of the book. So, and actually, I'm taking away from this, having been with two very nice people. I really like you, the two of you. And of course, I think the audience, it must be just like you. Fantastic. Thank you very much.
You're so welcome. Thank you. I want to thank you both for being guests on today's episode of the Roundtable Talk Show. And I especially want to thank everyone who tuned in to watch the show live, as well as everyone who is watching in the archives. We definitely appreciate your support, but please go ahead and support our guests. Their information, their links are in the website, in the description. Visit their websites, follow them on social media, reach out to them, send them a message. And when you do, please let them know Sharifa Hardy says hi. Now, if you're interested in more ways that I can help your business, or maybe you want to be a guest on the Roundtable Talk Show, please visit my website at asksharifa.com. Until tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. Pacific, everyone have a safe and a blessed day. Bye now.